which comprises R11, R12 and so on. Right, these are the actual values which are given. Now this equals the expressions for these values, right? These are in terms of theta I. Right, these are also in terms of theta I. Now what we have to do is we have to equate this portion to these terms, equate these expressions that are there, right, with the actual values that are there, and accordingly we can find out the values of theta I. From I from 1 to 6. Now when you calculate the transformation matrix, one thing that you can see as to where to start is you can try starting with the position vector, right? And if you see these x, y, z terms of the transformation matrix, that is these terms here, these are the actual values of x, y, z, and these are the expressions, and we have to equate these expressions with these values. Then you will get something that looks like this, that you can see on the left hand side. Now these you can see are only functions of theta 1, theta 2 and theta 3, right? Now one thing to keep in mind is, it is when you are starting to do inverse kinematics, you have to solve for the angles. So the lesser the number of variables, the better. So here you have three equations and you have three unknowns. It is clearly easy to solve. Now let us say that instead of uh, theta 1, theta 2 and theta 3, this x, y, z terms, the expressions contained even theta 4 and theta 5. Then you would get three equations with five unknowns. Now that clearly it is harder to solve. So this is one thing to keep in mind, that if suppose it happens that you find when you want to see from where to start, whether you should start equating this first term here, this R11 term here with the actual value of R11 or R12 to R12 and so on, it is preferable to first start with a set of relations wherein the total equations that you have matches the total unknowns. And in this case you have, if you equate the position vector terms over here, the values that are given with the expressions, then you get three equations, and all these equations have only theta 1, theta 2 and theta 3. Everything else is constant. So now this we can try and solve. So if you can take out your notebooks, we'll try and solve this first. So by looking at these equations, is the size okay of these equations? Can you read them?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so let us start. So does anyone have a suggestion where to start?
The term in the brackets is identical for both x and y, so we can use that. So it's c1 into some term minus s1 into some other term, and for y it's c1 and s1 are flipped, so we could use that too.
C1 into uh, X.
This whole a2 c2 plus a3 c2 3, that whole term is common for both x and y.
Yeah, correct.
So if we just call that some lambda for now, so it's c1
Mhm.
lambda minus d3 s1 and s1 lambda plus d3 c1. So we can use that symmetry to solve for s1.
Yeah,
So to
so
solve for
what will
theta 1.
let us say that this is equation 1, 2, and 3. What should I write? C1 into uh, Y minus S1 into X, something like this, to eliminate these terms.
Ideally, but that is simply giving us d3 as the answer.
Yeah, that will give D3 as the answer.
So which we already know the value of d3, so that is not useful for us. So what we'll have to do is s1y plus c1x.
S11, S1.
I'm not sure what we should do actually.
Yeah, so just take some time, think what exactly we should do. Why is this equation not useful? This one, we know X, we know Y, and we know D3. From this we can certainly calculate theta 1, right?
Yes, so we should be able to. It's one equation in one variable, so
Yeah. So what will theta 1 be here? How do you do it?
I think we'll have to substitute s1 is root of c1 1 minus c1 square and get a quadratic and get two values of c1.
Yeah, 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 correct. That is the way you get it. Get a quadratic equation. Uh, the standard way to formally put it, has anyone heard of this tangent half angle formulas?
Yes, the one like we use in integration for.
Yeah. This is what you said is also right. You can certainly do it that way also. There's nothing wrong. This is formally how they do it. And I'll just explain from the textbook. Right? These are known as the tangent half angle formulas when you make these substitutions. Now when you plug them into this C1y minus S1x equals D3, you get so from this you can get x1 as 2 times tan inverse or sorry, theta 1 as 2 times tan inverse minus b 2 times plus or minus root of b square or minus 2x divided by 2 times t3 plus y minus 4 into d3 square minus y square. Is this correct, more or less?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Right. So you got theta 1 so far. You can also do it that way, which you had mentioned. You can write S1 as root of 1 over C1 square, and you can solve from there. You can take the square on both sides and expand. That also is correct. I think you'll get more or less the same expression.
It has to be the same because
Yes. So you're right. Okay. So far so good. So now theta 1 is done. What is the next step? Theta 2 and theta 3. Which one can we find first? It is just a bit of mathematics, that's all, and nothing more. I'm just rubbing this. I hope all of you have made a note of this. Yeah. So just take your time and think which one and how do we calculate theta 2 and theta 3, or which one is can be calculated first.
Sir, we can find theta 2 next.
Theta 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. How?
In the first equation, the thing in the bracket, sir. Now that we know theta 1, we can find that explicitly, the thing in the bracket. We can find the value of that by substituting theta 1 and d3 and x.
Yeah, okay. So I'll call this lambda. So uh, you can calculate what is lambda equals x plus d3 s1 divided by c1, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll substitute it here. Where will substitute?
I think you have to use the third equation because anyway with the second equation also you can only find value of lambda.
Yeah.
You have to use the third one.
So we can use the third one to find theta 3 next.
Okay, how?
So we know the value of lambda, we know the value of z. So S2 lambda plus C2 z if we do.
S2 lambda
plus C2 z.
C2z will give what?
So that cancels out the A2 term. And the A3 term becomes S2 C23 minus C2 S23.
What will this be equal to?
The A2 term cancels out between the two of them. There's an A3 term and there's a D4 term. So the coefficient of A3 comes out to be S2 C23 minus C2 S23. So basically that is the angle subtraction formula. So you get 2 minus 3 minus 2, which is S3. And for D4, you get the coefficient C3.
Okay, what is the coefficient of S2? Or A2? A2? Means
A2 is 0.
Okay, 0, and A3 is?
S3.
Minus S3.
Minus S3.
So minus S3 into A3.
Yeah.
Minus D4 into C3.
Okay, D4 into C3. Now, what will this be equal to?
We
Lambda
already
S2 plus C2.
we already have the LHS there.
Oh, you already have the expression for lambda. Yeah, but this is S2, right? We don't have S2.
Yeah, it's S2. It's S2. Managed to separate the two angles, but so perhaps we can.
Okay. If you can observe one thing, this here A2 C2 is there. Then you have A2 S2 here. Whatever values, or the three A2 A3 and D4, they are reserved over here. The only difference is that C2 here is replaced in the Z term by S2, C23 by S23, and S23 by C23. So for example, if we did something like this, what would we get? If any of you have the answer, you can tell me.
Sir, it will result in d3 square plus a2 square plus a3 square plus d4 square plus 2 a2 a3 c3. I mean, we will get theta 3.
Yeah, so just tell me again, d3 square.
d3 square plus d4 square.
Yeah.
Plus a2 square plus a3 square.
Yeah.
Plus 2 a2 a3 into cos theta 3 c3.
Yeah. Okay.
There's one more term, the sin theta 3 term.
Okay, which is
Minus 2 a2 d4 sin theta 3.
a2 d4 sin theta.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this is similar to that what we had done previously, where we got c3 into something plus s. I think what is that expression? C1 into y plus minus s1 into x equals d3, right? So this looks something similar to this. C3 into something, S3 into something. C3 into this, C3 into this, S3 into this equals some constant term. So I suppose we can use that same method to calculate what is theta 3. So you can do that later on. It is same method. You can put as one of you mentioned, S3 as root of 1 minus C3 square, and then you can accordingly calculate what is theta 3. Right? So far so good. So we have theta 1, you have theta 3. What about theta 2?
Sir, we already had that equation from earlier where we had separated S2, C2, S3, C3. We can input value of C3 and S3 in that to get theta 2.
Yeah. Yes, correct. That earlier, that S2 lambda, that one.
Yes, sir. S2 lambda plus C2 Z is equal to minus A3 S3 minus D4 C3.
Yeah, correct. Okay. So from this again, this is for the same form, S2 into something plus C2 into something equals some constant, because you know some theta 3. So again the same thing you can do, and you can get the value of theta 2, right? So far so good. Any difficulty so far? right? So in this case, this is just something I forgot to mention. If you calculate the value of theta 1, right, you got something like 2 tan inverse minus something plus or minus root over something divided by 2 times something, right? So in this case, you can see that there are two values of theta 1, right? And what will be the range of values of theta 1?
Minus 180 to 180.
Minus 180. What is the range of tan inverse?
Minus 90 to 90.
Minus 90 to 90. Plus or minus 2 tan inverse will be okay. Yeah, this 0 to minus 2 pi. Oh, sorry. Something like this.
Yes, sir.
So we'll also have to consider other solutions for theta 1, right? Because tan inverse can give solutions that differ by pi as well. And at least one of those alternative solutions has to lie between.
Yeah. So how would you like tan inverse? The way of calculating the range of theta 1 is first calculate the range of tan inverse and then twice that.
Okay, so the plus minus pi would become plus minus 2 pi, so it doesn't affect the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this correct?
Yes, it's correct. It's correct.
Okay, just check it. The textbook seems to think it is 0 to 2 pi.
So anyway, minus pi to pi covers the full circle. So instead of that, you can take 0 to 2 pi.
Yeah.
Initially, in our first to second lecture, we had said that the space is for theta between minus pi to pi. So that's why we following the textbook might be following a different convention. That's all.
Yeah,
But
different. Yes, tan inverse they might be taking. Okay, okay, yes. So just just check the. I'll also check this. Why it is saying 0 to 2 pi. Please go home and check this also. The same way you will get two values of theta 3. In all three cases, you can see you will get some expression like this. It is using the tangent half angle formula. So the range of values of theta 2 also, for example, they have given as same 0 to 2 pi. Theta 2 also you will get as 2 tan inverse something, right? Same you will get for theta 3 also. So these are the ranges of angles that are there, and for each, because of this plus minus sign that is there, you will get two values, right? So these define the range of values, and these define the uniqueness. They're clearly not unique. There more than one solution is there. right?
One small doubt, sir.
Yes.
For each of the three angles, we'll have a plus minus situation. So will it be that there will be only two triplets with a specific, like plus 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 is one triplet and minus 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 is the other triplet? Or will there be 2 raised to 3, that is 8 triplets, where you have every combination plus 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 minus, like that?
They could, there could be a matching. It is certainly possible that there could be a matching.
Okay, so it need not be that all 8 will be valid thetas.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
Okay.
This actually, if you see for a Puma robot, 8 solutions are the total number. If you consider theta I from 1 to 6, theta 1, theta 2, theta 3 up till theta 6, then you get 8 different solutions. This you can very easily check if you go to this. How many solutions are there? If you want to find out, just go to Robo Analyzer, 6 degrees of freedom and Puma, right? Click on inverse kinematics and it'll show how many solutions are there. You can see here 8 solutions will be there. So for different types of robots, for different degrees of freedom, 1 to 7 is there. You have different robots, and for that, if you click inverse kinematics, it'll show how many solutions are there.
So the inverse kinematics window is not available on your screen.
Inverse kinematics is?
The inverse kinematics window that appears in Robo Analyzer, that is not visible in yours. In yours, yes, whatever.
This one is not visible. Now it is visible.
No, sir. So, but it's fine. We checked in our softwares only.
Yeah. Okay. Now it's visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you have X, Y, Z, and you have solution 1, solution 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if you press inverse kinematics here, icon that you can see, for these X, Y, Z values and for these values of the orientation matrix R, you will get all these 8 different solutions from theta 1 to theta 6.
To note here, sir, is that there's only 2 solution sets for theta 1, theta 2, theta 3. So it's only alternating between those.
Yeah, when we total are 8, theta 4, theta 5, theta 6, also we have to calculate right now. Yeah, but for theta 1 to theta 3, certainly it won't be 8.
So there's only that minus 168 solution and the 11 solution. Yes. Only 2 of them.
Yes. There are 2 sets for theta 1, 2 for theta 3, and theta 2 actually depends on theta 3. So there are 4 possible values for theta 2 then. So amongst these 8 sets, 2 possible. There are how many were there for theta 1, theta? Just let me go back.
So there are 2 unique theta 1s, but 4 unique theta 2s and 4 unique theta 3s.
Yeah, so if you see here, there are 2 values for theta 1, right, which we got separately. For theta 3 also we got 2 values separately, and theta 2, if you see this expression here, it is dependent on theta 3. So theta 2 we get 4 values, right? So including all possible sets of values, whether they are merged or not, total will certainly get 8, irrespective of what happens with theta 4, theta 5 and theta 6. So 8 are minimum there. That much this should be the minimum. We'll see what happens with theta 4, theta 5, theta 6, but certainly there will be minimum 8. because this we have calculated separately. This also we have calculated separately. Only this one was dependent. So 4 are there certainly which are separate, and 4 are dependent. So in principle we should get 8. So I'll just take back what I said. Who was it who asked that question?
I had Vikram.
Yes. So there will be 8. Yes. Okay. There will be 8. Theta 2 depends on theta 3. I did not see this. Theta 2 depends on theta 3. So clearly this will be 4. It will not be 2. So yes, there certainly will be 8. 8 solutions will be there. Yes.
Sir, can you switch on recording?
Sorry?
I know it's late in the lecture. Can you switch on recording?
It is recording at the moment.
Yeah, it is recording.
It is recording. Okay.
Yeah. So in any case, if you have any doubt, as I said, just open Robo Analyzer for various robots. They have shown how many solutions are there, inverse kinematics. This is as a practice, you can do this. All you have to do is just substitute whatever is the XY position and some orientation terms, and the solutions you will see. And just to reiterate, just one second. Right? Once again, this is for just one second. Yes, so for various robots it is shown. So what you can do is you can just click on any one. Just I hope you can all see this. Just one second. Is this visible, Robo Analyzer? Yeah. So 6 degrees of freedom, Puma, then inverse kinematics, then select the robot. Okay, here Puma is not there. The one that I showed was for some other robot. So Puma is not here, I guess. So for Puma, you have to separately do on your own. But for many other robots, are you able to see this inverse kinematics tab right now?
Yes, so now it's visible.
Yes.
Yeah. So this, the one that I showed the 8 solutions, it was, if you can see at the top, MTab Aristo. If you click the scroll down this button, then you'll see many different robots. So for each of them, if you click 3R planar, you need only 3 inputs, X, Y, and Phi, and you get 2 solutions. Similarly, if you calculate for some KUKA robot, right, that is a 6 degree of freedom robot, you'll again get 8 solutions and so on. And if you want to simulate what are these 8 solutions, right, let us just do this. Right. Here in this KUKA robot, just click inverse kinematics. It will show analysis complete. Select initial values for solution 1, final values for this. Okay. And then accordingly, when you open this particular
Sir, instead of the window, can you share your entire desktop so we can see what you're doing?
Yeah, I'll just see what is this. Now you're able to see
Yes, sir.
both of these. Right, so I'll just do this again. Just go to 6 degrees of freedom, then on the left hand side you can see KUKA KR5 arc and click load selected robot. So you will get such a robot. You can use this to zoom out a little bit. Right, now click on inverse kinematics. Are you able to see this another window that has opened up?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. So here also just click, there is a select robot at the top. You can select KUKA KR5 arc. Right, so these are some values that they have loaded, default values. You can change them if you want. On the right hand side, end effectors position X, Y, Z, and the orientation matrix. These terms we know, they are given. So if you, there you can see solution 1, solution 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. If you just click inverse kinematics, this icon button, you will get all the 8 solutions for this particular set of values of X, Y, Z and so on. Now if you want to simulate this, just click forward kinematics for initial values, solution 1, right, and you will see a change in the shape of this. Now for example, if I click solution 2 and solution 2 and I click OK, just keep watching this figure. The end effector changed. Then finally solution 3, again this shape changed. Are you able to see it? Solution 4, the shape again changed. Solution 5. Did you see that? Just try this right now on your screen.
Sir, these options, solution 1, solution 2, these are different initial values.
No. These are when you are simulating the forward kinematics. So you are resubstituting all these values to get the end effector positions again, the XYZ positions again. So if you see this thing here for FKIN, for forward kinematics, these solutions you have calculated by inverse kinematics. When you resubstitute back them into the transformation matrix, then you'll get what is the end effector position.
Okay, sir.
Similarly, select solution 6, final values. This again will change. Solution 7, solution final values. It will again change, and so on. Or you can just directly click this show. Let us do it this way. Under solution 1, you can see this show button. Show. This is, you can see a change in that shape of the figure. Solution 2, show. The wrist position has changed. Solution 3, it has changed, you can see it. Solution 4, the wrist position has changed. Solution 5, a different orientation. Solution 6, the wrist position. Solution 7, the shape has changed. solution 8. So just click this show button that is there underneath this solution 1, solution 2 and so on, and you'll see how the shape of the figure goes on changing.
Sir, for all these solutions, the end effector must end while doing the forward kinematics. The end effector should end at the same position.
Substitute and see. Do you think you'll get the same or different? What do you think?
Sir, I think we will get the same because we have solved for the same.
Correct, exactly.
But I can't. I think it is different.
Just see, it is here at this point. Same point the end effector is. Again, 4 also same point. Just keep observing if this point here changes. It is again there.
Sir, in the Fkin you can select different solution values and then click OK, and then if you do Fkin and play, you can see it. You can see the path going back and coming to the same.
Yeah, correct. That also you can do.
Yes, sir, I got it. I made a mistake. I saw for a different robot.
Yeah.
So some of these solutions will be more preferable over others.
Come again?
Sir, some of these solutions will be more preferable over other solutions, right? Like say you will if you are at some initial position, then some solutions will give for some solutions you will have to travel less or you will have to rotate less.
Yes,
So
you are right.
Do we keep that in mind also, like while doing manipulations?
Yes, you need to keep it in mind. You need to keep it in mind, especially when you're doing tasks. For example, for particular type of tasks, the orientation of if the wrist orientation, it must be in a particular way to carry out that task. If you want to weld, if you want to attach a welding device, for example, as compared to a drilling machine or some other, maybe a gripper or something. So it depends on what all tasks you are doing, and you're absolutely right that certain solutions are much more preferable. Now, which solutions to prefer, that depends on what your task is. Like I said, for gripping, maybe one kind of solution is better. For drilling, some other kind of solution may be better. It depends on what you're putting at the end effector. That is one criteria. And it also depends on how you're moving. For example, if you're moving from one given orientation, for example, this one in the figure, from this position you want to move to another position, it may be more convenient as compared to if it is like this. So it also depends on where you want to move to next. These solutions are only for a given x, y and z. But suppose x, y and z is going on changing to move to, let us say, x1, y1, z1. Then it may be easier to move from one orientation for x, y, z to another orientation for x1, y1, z1 in a much easier manner for one solution as compared to another solution. So yes, you're absolutely right that it does matter, and how it matters, it depends on the particular task. When you do trajectory planning and then finally when you do control, you'll probably get a much clearer idea of this. Right, so far so good.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so let us just finish what we had started. Let us go back to this whiteboard. Or perhaps I'll just directly show you. 1 second. Yes, so we had calculated theta 1, theta 2, theta 3. Now to obtain theta 4, theta 5 and theta 6, we can do it in this manner. As I had said, I had separated the transformation matrix from 0 to 3 and 3 to 6. It is for this reason. If you see the rotation matrix from 3 to 6, it looks something like this. C4, C5, C6 and so on. Are you able to see this PowerPoint slide?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it looks something like this. Now here in this rotation matrix you have 9 values, right? There are 9 components there. And the unknowns are theta 4, theta 5 and theta 6. And if you see this, the rotation matrix for 3 to 6, can you also make another observation from this? You can see that there are only theta 5, theta 4, theta 5 and theta 6. There are only 3 variables here. So how to deal with this? You can write the rotation matrix for 3 to 6 with respect to 3 as 3 with respect to 0 transpose multiplied by 0 to 6, 6 with respect to 0. The rotation matrix of 6 with respect to 0. Why is this? Did everyone understand how I'm able to write this kind of expression right here?
Because the rotation matrix is an orthogonal matrix.
Yeah, inverse, correct. R transpose is R inverse. So I'm just, if you write, for example, the rotation matrix for 0 to 6, it should be 0 to 3 multiplied by 3 to 6. I have simply taken the inverse of that. And the transpose equals the inverse for the rotation matrix. So that's why you get this relation. Now in 0 to 3 you have theta 1, theta 2 and theta 3 which we have calculated. And 0 to 6, that those are the values that are given to us. The components are given. So the right hand side is known. And from that you can obtain theta 4, theta 5 and theta 6. There is also another thing to this, that when you are solving for this, if you compare this matrix, it will resemble something similar to the ZYZ Euler angles, the rotation matrix corresponding to the ZYZ Euler angles, with the only exception that the Y rotation is happening by minus theta phi. So whatever algorithm was there that we used, if you remember in the Euler angles when I was teaching that A tan 2 function, you can obtain similar formulas with the only difference that the Y rotation is happening by minus theta phi, right? And this is the algorithm that it is shown over here. You can go and try and match it. For example, with the algorithm for ZYZ Euler angles. And here also, when there were certain cases that we calculated when the algorithm would fail. Here it will fail if R23, that term in this rotation matrix 0 to 6, if R23 is plus or minus 1, right? And so for both of those cases, when R23 is plus or minus 1, this is the convention that they have adopted to take both as 0 and so on, one as 0 and the other as 0 or pi. So this, if you remember, it is quite similar to what we did in the Euler angles when we studied the Euler angles. For some condition which doesn't break down, we calculated in this way, A tan 2 function, and when it does break down, we calculated them separately by putting one of the values as 0 and so on. So the same thing they have done here. Same thing can be done for this case. It resembles the ZYZ Euler angle case with a Y rotation of minus theta phi.
So one small doubt.
Yeah.
So here we can treat this similarity with the ZYZ Euler angles is happening because it's a coincident twist, right?
Coincident twist.
Or will this always happen even if it is?
I'll discuss them. I'll discuss the non-intersecting rest in this lecture. You'll find out by the end of the lecture.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Basically, what you have to check is that is it matching the Euler angle, the rotation matrix corresponding to the Euler angles? Is this matrix here? Is it matching that or not? If it matches, then yes. So I'll just move on. Now the workspace of this. Now what did we define the workspace to be? The workspace, if you remember what we learned in the inverse kinematics of 3R manipulator, it was all the position and orientation such that the inverse kinematic solution exists. Now in this case, it is clearly a 6-dimensional entity, which is quite difficult to imagine. But it is also possible that we can derive the position workspace of the wrist point, right? So if you see the position vector of the wrist point that is given by the XYZ terms, the position vector of the transformation matrix, this is what we just saw, these XYZ terms. These are functions of 3 independent variables, theta 1, theta 2 and theta 3. So they represent some kind of solid in 3-dimensional space. So we can obtain what are the equations of these bounding surfaces of the solid. How do we do this? Now when you square and add the three equations, right? You get r square equals x square plus y square plus z square equals something that looks like this. This is what we did to calculate theta 3. If you remember, we squared all the terms. We get some constant k1 plus some k2 into c3 minus k3 into s3, where k1, k2, k3 are some constants. Now this envelope of this family of surfaces, it must satisfy this partial derivative of r square del r square divided by del partial derivative of theta 3. It is the partial derivative. Before proceeding, does anyone know what a partial derivative is?
Yes, so we did multivariable calculus in the second semester.
Oh, you did. Okay, fine, very good. Okay. So if you want to find the bounding surfaces, then the envelope of this family of surfaces, it must satisfy this expression. Del r square by del theta 3 equal to 0. So which gives this term to be 0. When you take the partial derivative of this with respect to theta 3, then you get k2 into s3 plus k3 into c3 equals 0. Right? Now you can eliminate this theta 3 and you can denote a3 square plus d4 square by L square. For example, if you see this k1 term that we got, if you remember when we calculated theta 3 and we did a x square plus y square plus z square, we got something like a3 square plus a2 square plus d3 square plus d4 square and so on, which were a part of k1. Now in that, when you denote a3 square plus d4 square by L square, right, and you try to eliminate this theta 3, then you get this kind of expression, x square plus y square plus z square minus this equals 0. Now this is of course the equation of a sphere, which means that the bounding surfaces are all spheres. So at every point in that solid, right, all possible orientations except the special cases, that is when this r23 term equals plus or minus 1, which was the case when our inverse kinematics was breaking down. If you remember, I just mentioned this. Except these terms, at every point in the solid, you can get all possible orientations, right? Now, there is a term here that they've used, except two singular configurations. Now, has anyone of you heard the word singular before?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, where have you heard it?
In case of like black holes, we have studied, means like we have heard where the normal laws fail to explain the things. So here in this case, singular configurations, like where our theory like breaks down or does not work as intended.
Yeah.
In mathematics also, singular points are basically somewhere where a function is not well behaved, where some sort of continuity does not hold.
Yes. So here in kinematic singularities, basically they imply that the basic idea when you do kinematics is that if you, there is a given functional relation between thetas and x, y, and z, right? So for a given theta, if you substitute, you will get x, y, z. That is the forward kinematics. And if you have a given x, y, z, then you should get theta back. Now there are particular configurations where even if you go on changing the values of theta, it will not affect x, y, z. There are some very special configurations, especially for bigger robots, more number of degrees of freedom, robots that have more number of degrees of freedom, where if you actually change the values of theta, it will not have any effect on the position and orientation, that is XYZ. These are recognized as singular configurations. They are known as kinematic singularities. So this R23 equals plus or minus 1, which is where our algorithm was breaking down, as I showed over here, right? This actually represents a kinematic singularity, singular configuration. Now, the proper definition of singularities in robots, when I'm teaching velocity and static analysis, then I'll take it. But right now I'm just introducing the definition, so you'll know this. A kinematic singularity is when you are not able to effect any change in the end position, that is the XYZ position, even if you go on changing the joint variables, theta 1, theta 2, and so on. That is the meaning of a kinematic singularity. So if you try and yes, please tell me.
Sir, I wanted to know the reason why the partial derivative is 0. Like, why is r square not affected by theta 3? Basically, I might be lost. But why is the reason that the partial derivative must be equal to 0?
We want to find obtain the equations of these bounding surfaces.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so this envelope of this family of surfaces, the derivative of this expression, that is their r square, with respect to theta 3, what will that give? What is del y by del x? If you want to find an envelope of this family of surfaces, a bound, that is what you want to find out. Now this del r square by del theta 3, that is of the form like something like del y by del x, or something of that kind. Now what does del y by del x, something like this, represent? Or let me make it even clearer, what does dy by dx represent?
So that is what I'm asking. It represents that there is no change of r square with respect to d3, right? Basically here. If the derivative is partial derivative of r square with respect to theta 3 is 0, then it represents that r square won't change with any change in theta 3, right?
There is no change of r square with respect to theta 3. How is, no, clearly there is a change, right?
No. Sorry. So I got confused, sir. I get it now.
Yeah. Just think about it this way. What does this dy, if you have y as a function of x, what does dy by dx represent?
Yes, a slope. It represents slope, and so I was thinking in some other terms, sir. I got lost in that. I get it now.
Yeah. So so if you actually plot the workspace, if you actually try and define what are these bounding surfaces, right? If you actually try and plot this equation here, it will give something like this. But this is only, just to mention, it is a subset of the shown workspace because of the joint rotation limits. For example, we had calculated some limits, right? Theta 1, theta 2, and theta 3, there were some limits. So here, just for simulation purposes, they have taken any theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, and so on. But the actual workspace will keep in mind the joint rotation limits. So the workspace looks something like this. It is quite difficult to picture, right? You just have to, in some cases, when you have 6 degrees of freedom, there is no way you can actually by looking at a figure, tell if it is correct or not. The best that you can do is check your equations, and if your equations are correct, then whatever figure you are getting, you just have to accept it. For example, this figure, just compare it to the 3R case, the 3R manipulator that we had studied. We had got a relatively simpler workspace. If you remember, we got 2 configurations, and I was able to show the links also of their projections in the XY plane. It was easy to picture. In this case, it is even difficult to picture what will be the configuration of each link to get this kind of workspace. So in such cases where you have very large degrees of freedom, all you can do is just check if these equations are correct, and when you simulate them, whatever answer you get, whatever figure you get, you just have to accept. That's all. So in this case, it turns out to be something like this, that looks like this. Yeah, so I'll just finish with some observations on inverse kinematics before moving on to the next part. A manipulator will be considered solvable if the joint variables can be determined by whatever algorithm we have, right? So that we can get all the set of joint variables for a given position and orientation, right? And the fundamental point about this, the way of defining solvability, is that when you have multiple solutions, it is possible to actually calculate all those solutions. In some cases, right, there you will certainly get multiple solutions. You know that there will be multiple solutions, but you may not be able to get some analytical expressions. You may have to solve them numerically. For example, if they are nonlinear equations, linear equations, of course, you can solve simultaneously. Nonlinear equations, they are not easy to solve simultaneously. And there is no guarantee that you will get some explicit analytical expression. For example, has any one of you heard the word closed form solution?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So what is a closed form solution?
Basically, there is a formula, specific formula that gives you the answer exactly.
Exactly, correct. So in certain cases here, the equations are nonlinear. So the trouble with nonlinear equations is, of course, that you may not get a closed form solution. So in that case, you have to solve numerically. So generally in robotics, when you, as I mentioned here in the second point, if you can see the point about this above definition, the way we are defining solvability is that we have to calculate all the solutions. So a numerical iterative procedure, when you don't have closed form solutions, you have to solve them numerically by using numerical methods. They are generally not considered as solving the manipulator. Okay, because numerical methods, they have their own limitations. Not all numerical methods can solve all nonlinear equations. There are different methods which are more effective in some cases as compared to others. So the definition of solvability is fundamentally what we are defining for cases where we get some kind of analytical expression, closed form solutions, right? Now these closed form solutions, they can be either geometric or in the form of some algebraic expression, but as long as we get either, it is fine. Now just to make this point clearer about solvability, there are some major results in kinematics, and what I'm showing here in this this slide and the next slide, I think answers a few questions that you have asked today and even yesterday also. One of the major results in kinematics is that all systems with revolute and prismatic joints having a total of 6 degrees of freedom in a single series chain. they are solvable. So you will always get, for this case, a single series chain with 6 degrees of freedom. If you have, they are always solvable. You will always get analytical expressions. The second thing is, however, this general solution, if you want a general solution for a general 6R robot, irrespective of whether they are prismatic or revolute, and you want some general expression, that is always a numerical one. Right? When you specify, for example, a Puma, it has all revolute, or some which have all prismatic and so on. You can always specify it. But if you want to define a general 6 degrees of freedom robot, then that will always be a numerical one. Now, only in special cases can robots with 6 degrees of freedom be solved analytically. That is, I'm referring to general solutions of general 6R robots. These are robots for which a closed form solution exists. They are characterized either by having several intersecting joint axes or by having many alpha I equal to 0 or plus or 90 degrees. Right? So one of the consequences of this, what I have mentioned over here, having several intersecting joint axes. Right? If you remember, we discussed up till now an intersecting wrist, an intersecting joint axis. Now this is actually something that I think some of you had asked, what is the advantage of this? This is actually a criteria to get a closed form solution. It will guarantee it. You will get an analytical solution when you have several intersecting joint axes. So, for example, a sufficient condition that a manipulator with 6 revolute joints should have a closed form solution is that 3 neighboring joint axes intersect at a point. So in what robot we had studied, 3 of them are certainly intersecting at a point, which is why we were able to get some kind of closed form solution, with one exception of that singular configurations where R23 was plus or minus 1. It is for this reason, you can see this point here, second last, that almost every manipulator with 6 degrees of freedom which is built today, it has 3 axes intersecting. Although this is changing, right? But up till recently this was true. But because of, as I'll explain, that there are some disadvantages also to this, that it is difficult to manufacture a robot which has 3 intersecting axes. But there is also an advantage. The advantage is that you are able to get closed form solutions. You don't have to rely on numerical methods. And the last point, this is something that is a part of your assignment 2, which I'll give you today. The decoupling of the position and orientation, it was first observed by somebody called Piper. The reference I have given at the end of the slides, right? So if you see here, important readings, I have given this reference. But the point is that he studied manipulators with intersecting wrists, and he was able to develop a solution. He was able to get a generalized solution to any 6 degrees of freedom serial wrist manipulators, where the 3 consecutive joint axes, as in our case, are intersecting. I have not shown the details of this. Details of this you can find in the book by Craig, right? And in that reference which I just mentioned. And I have asked a question in, I'll ask a question in your assignment 2 today when I give it to you, to read that and write a bit about it, whatever you understood from it, because this um, particular concept of three intersecting joint axes, this is quite a tricky one. It has an advantage, as I mentioned, that closed form solutions you can get, but the disadvantage is that it is a bit difficult to manufacture. So this the proper analysis of this, it is done by the method which is given by Piper. Please read it. It is in the book by Craig on the chapter on inverse kinematics. Whatever the method I've shown, that is still correct for inverse kinematics. This algorithm is still correct. But for general cases where you have three consecutive joint axes intersecting, there is a way of dealing with that, which is given here, which I'm not showing in this lecture because I want you to read it on your own. It is a case where three consecutive joint axes are intersecting, right? So please read it and see that solution, how to find the closed form solutions when you have a case where three consecutive joint axes is intersecting. In our case, it was a wrist, but it could be any three joint axes. So this is just a quick review of the inverse kinematics, what we have done. So generally we get the inverse kinematics equations as polynomial equations, and they are the correct expression for this is transcendental equations, that is of the form that sine theta 1 into some constant plus cos theta 1 into some constant equals some other constant. These kind of equations which you have, where you have to use these tangent half angle substitutions. That is what will happen when you do inverse kinematics, right? Then we solve for an equation that was quadratic in x square with x as tan theta by 2, right? So finally we got a single equation in a single one joint variable. First, for in our case we got for theta 1, then theta 3, and then finally theta 2. And for all 6 degrees of freedom serial manipulators where three joint axes are intersecting, at most you will get a fourth order polynomial in the tangent of a joint angle that needs to be solved. Another major thing we saw was that the manipulator wrist point can reach any position in the workspace in at most 4 possible ways. Now these 4th degree polynomials which I mentioned, when you have three joint axes intersecting, they can be solved in closed form solutions, and I've given another reference where they've proved this. You can refer to that, right? So the inverse kinematics of all these 6 degrees of freedom serial manipulators with three intersecting axes, they can be solved in closed form. We also saw what was the workspace of the wrist point, right? It is bounded by two spheres. If you want the general geometry of a robot with an intersecting wrist, the boundaries of the solid region can be traced by the wrist point from a torus with a 4th degree surface. This also is another result that has been found. I have given a reference. For those who are interested, you can read this reference. Now before we finish, I just wanted to show this. For non-intersecting wrists, I said I'll discuss them today. For non-intersecting wrists, the three joint axes are not intersecting, right? As I said, one of the difficulties is to design or manufacture these kind of robots where you have intersecting axes. It is much easier if the wrist has only two intersecting axes. That is what you can see in this figure, right? So if you do the DH parameters, and I'll allow you to do the DH parameters here for this. I suppose there'll only be a small change. This D5 is going to be added, right? But you can check this for this robot compared to what we did yesterday. I think more or less this is the same DH table with the exception of this D5, because only 2 are intersecting instead of all 3. So I'll leave that to you to calculate. So now when you do, that was the direct kinematics. For the inverse kinematics case, the last column of this transformation, it looks something like this, x, y, z, right? And this clearly, can you make some observation from this portion of this x, y, z? How is this x, y, z different from what we have studied for the non-intersecting risk case? You can see that x, y, z is a function of theta 1, theta 2, theta 3 and theta 4 also. So we have 4 variables and you have only 3 equations. So you need one more equation, right? So you can get that from this expression here, what we did for the intersecting risk case, that we wrote the rotation matrix of 6 with respect to 3 as 3 with respect to 0 transpose multiplied by 6 with respect to 0. So here when you divide the 1, 3 and the 3, 3 terms, right? When you divide this term here with this term, right, of the above matrix equation, just one second, first row third column divided by third row third column, yeah. Right, is that correct?
Yes, sir,
First,
correct.
is correct, yeah. The same you have to do on the right hand side. After multiplying this, then you'll get this kind of an expression, right? And now both of these equations, these 4 equations, you have to solve numerically to get theta 1, theta 2, theta 3 and theta 4. You can solve them numerically if you want. And in this case also, somebody had asked this question, you can solve for theta 4, theta 5 and theta 6 using the z minus yz inverse Euler angle algorithm, which is similar to the Puma 560 case. I have not shown this here, the calculation of theta 5 and theta 6, but it is indeed a bit similar to the inverse Euler angles. The same kind of thing you will get, z minus yz. So in the rotation about the y-axis, you have to take it by minus theta 5. Then the algorithm will be similar to the whatever we had learnt earlier for the ZYZ Euler angles. So in that sense, when you're calculating theta 5 and theta 6, it will be quite similar to the Puma 560 example with the intersecting risks. This I've left for you to do at home, how to solve them. You can solve them numerically, right? Now numerically means in MATLAB, for example, right? There is a function over there, fsolve. What I want you to do as some homework is open MATLAB and just take any function, any nonlinear function, and learn how to use the command fsolve. I think if I have just one second. Let's see if it opens, then we'll do it. But that's what numerically means. So solving numerically means that there is a command that you have numerical methods. There are several numerical methods. If you want to do it in MATLAB, you have to do it using some fsolve, something like this. Let me just see if I can open this. It is still opening. Yeah. Yeah, so far so good.
Sir, one idea I was thinking of is if that last d5 distance is small, then for a numerical approach, can we do like consider d5 to be 0, get some solution, and then try to approximate the actual numerical solution from that d5 equal to 0 solution?
You can do that, but I don't know how effective numerical solutions are. Numerical methods, they have their own issues. Not all numerical algorithm. You have to choose the numerical method carefully. Some methods, they are effective for solving certain types of problems. Others may not be as effective.
Okay.
So yes, you can do that. If d5 is less, certainly you can try it. You can try and equate.
Because the distance in the joint variable space would be small, so I would be guessing it would be relatively easier to find that solution than start from some general position.
Yes, that is true. You can do that. You can do that.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So I've just opened this MATLAB. I'll just share it with you. Right. Now, as I said, can you all see this MATLAB
Yes,
window?
sir.
Yeah. So, but the first thing to learn in MATLAB is that if you want any, if you have trouble knowing how to use a function, then just if you know at least the name of the function, then you can do this. Help fsolve if you know what is the name of the function, right? And it'll just come. And a whole entire explanation that you can see here has come, that how to solve. You can see fsolve solves systems of nonlinear equations of several variables. It attempts to solve equations of the form f of x equals 0, where f and x may be vectors or matrices. Right? So how it does it is x equals fsolve, the function, and the initial value x naught. When you give both of these as input and you type fsolve, then it will give you the end result. So what I want you to do is just go through this. Just 1 second. Yeah, there is an example also taken here. I hope you can see this. Function f equals myfun x comma c, where f is defined as, right, 2x bracket 1, that is the first component of the vector x, minus x bracket 2, that is the second component, minus e raised to c x of 1. This is the first one, minus x of 1 plus 2x of 2 and so on. This is a function, right? And now what they are saying is you write x equals fsolve, the name of the function, and what are the initial values. When you get this, when you put this in here, then you should get some value of x, right? So just go through this, how to use fsolve, just type help fsolve and an entire explanation will come in MATLAB as to how to use it with an actual example also. Right? So for example, they have taken one example here for sin x, one for sin 3x, a third one for this kind of expression 2x minus this exponential and so on. So you as some homework you can try and do this and you can try and figure out how to solve numerically. There's just one other thing which I wanted to finish in this lecture. Just give me 1 minute. Yeah, there is another thing, another way of doing this, of doing nonlinear equations. This is something that I had worked on. Now, if you can just try this right now for nonlinear equations, just type in this term sy ms xy. This is it basically means that you're going to use x and y as symbolic expressions and not as values. Then just type in one function, that is x square minus 4y square. So when you write an expression like this, it means this equals 0. So the first equation you are representing by x square minus 4y square as 0. Or you can make it even better. Yeah, just type this in, x square minus 4y square, and just type in some second function as 3x minus 6y cube. Both of these you can see are nonlinear. So this also equals sum 0. And then you can type in xd equals solve. Instead of fsolve, I am just putting in plain solve. f1, f2, comma x, comma y. So it is solving both of these functions which are equated to 0 for the values of x and y. When you do this, you should get something like this. X you are getting 5 values and y 5 values. 5 cross 1 means that the answer vector of x has 5 values. To extract those values, you just click xd, that was whatever you had put here on the left hand side of this solution, dot x, and the answer will give you what all are the values of x. And if you click xd dot y, then what all are the values of y. Just do this and see if you are getting it.
So what do the sims xy do?
It means that x and y are going to be considered as symbols, not as some values. So MATLAB generally, if you just say x square plus 4y square, if you write like this, f1 equals this, then it's going to ask what is the value of x and what is the value of y. But if you put it as sims, it means it can take any value. It's a symbolic value.
Okay.
In all cases, it is not able to solve. Because in both these cases, the case that I mentioned, it was quite trivial. Both these expressions, this first expression was x square minus 4y square equal to 0. And this also 3x minus 6y cube was 0. So solve was able to do for that case. But if you put, for example, x square minus 4y square plus something and 3x minus 6y cube plus something, then in that case, this solve is not able to do. Right? So that is a limitation of this function solve, which is why you have to use this fsolve that I discussed earlier. Fsolve, function solve, that is something that you should read at home, that how you should use this fsolve. There are a number of examples also given. But for this case, are you all getting the solution? When you're typing in x square minus 4y square, 3x minus 6y cube and on, and when you're clicking solve,
Yes.
are you all getting these kind of solutions? 0, 2, minus 2 and so on?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is everyone getting?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay then. So I'll just take another 5 minutes. I just wanted to discuss a general case. This is the inverse kinematics of serial robots with n greater, n lesser than 6. I'll just, 1 second. I just forgot to change it. Right, so this general case I'll just discuss. Now this transformation matrix, it defines the position and orientation of n with respect to the 0 frame, and in general it provides up to 6 for 3-dimensional and 3 for planar task space pieces of information, that values in task space x, y, phi and so on, where n is the number of unknown joint variables. Now if you have n is as less than 6 for the 3D case, or n is less than 3 for the planar case, then there exists 6 minus n or 3 minus n for planar functional relations involving the task space variables. Now that is a case of constrained manipulators. Now an example of this is, for example, when we considered the planar manipulator, right? When I was discussing the planar case, could you remember what was the difference between the 2R planar and the 3R planar? Especially when we were discussing was theta 1 plus theta 2 tan inverse of y by x. Do you remember that? What was the difference between the 2R and the 3R
main difference would be that, to put it succinctly, there would be no dexterous workspace for the 2R manipulator. So given the x and y, the phi that is obtained for the 2R would be fixed.
Yes, so you did not require phi for the 2R case, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is, if n was less than 3 for planar, then there will exist 3 minus n functional relations involving the task space variables. So these are what are called constrained manipulators. Now, what are these functional relations? You can obtain by inspecting the geometry. In the planar case, it is quite simple. You can just look and make out, or by using the theory of elimination. This is outside the scope of our course. It is generally used in 3D cases, right? But the important part is you should know that if n is less than 6, there will exist 6 minus n functional relations. That is the important part. So I'll just take a couple of minutes to just give a small example of this, right? So just take the SCARA robot. We already know how to calculate the transformation, right? Now due to the geometry, and you can see from the figure that only angle phi represents the orientation of 4. The other two Euler angles are 0. When you make the calculation, this is what you will find. So the only the position, that is x, y, z, and the angle phi is relevant in this case. So for x, y, z, and phi, you don't need any other variable. So where you have n minus n is less than 6, you will have accordingly 6 minus whatever that n is functional relations, right? So in this case, the inverse kinematics you can obtain by solving these equations for x, y, z, and phi to get theta 1, theta 2, theta 4, and d3. If you remember, in SCARA robot, even d3 was varying, right? And the unknown joint variables you can calculate as shown over here. These are the joint variables. When you solve them, you will get these kind of expressions. And ultimately, you will get two possible sets of joint variables for a given x, y, z, and phi. And the workspace is such that all reachable points will lie in an annular cylinder with the inner and outer radii given by L1 minus L2 and L1 plus L2. And that also for this case, L1 is greater than L2. So for the 3R case, we had seen where exactly the workspace would lie. It would lie, the maximum workspace we saw, there were 4 circles, and between the outermost and the lowermost, the smallest was the maximum workspace, whereas the dexterous workspace was between the second and the third. In this case, all the reachable points, they will lie in this annular cylinder with this inner and outer radii given by L1 minus L2 and L1 plus L2. Right? So this was a case of n lesser than 6. In the next lecture, I'll just explain in short, in brief, what will happen when n is greater than 6, what kind of things you can expect. So yeah, so I'll stop here right now. Today I'll give your assignment 2, and our next class on Wednesday I'll meet. And one other thing, please start preparing for your quiz also. Most probably it'll be there on next Friday. And I will do it exactly the way we discussed yesterday. I'll probably just put it up on the screen and you can solve it on paper and take a snapshot or scan it or however and send it to me. Right? So that is all. You can log off right now. I think it's almost time.
So what was the
we'll meet
syllabus
on
of the quiz?